I want to share how a simple evening ritual helped me get rid of those painful nighttime leg cramps. It may seem like a minor issue, but in reality, it was exhausting for me. As I've gotten older, it seems the wires in my legs have weakened, like an old phone that shorts out, goes silent, or jolts you awake in the middle of the night. I noticed this last fall when the days grew shorter and the nights longer. I'd go to bed, and just as I was starting to doze off, suddenly my calves would cramp up, as if a steel hand had grabbed hold of them. I jumped up, paced around the room, rubbed my hands, and sat on the edge of the bed. I blamed it on the weather, my age, and thought maybe I hadn't been drinking enough water. In the mornings, I would wake up feeling completely drained. My eyes were puffy and my head felt foggy. My wife would worry, "You didn't sleep again, did you?" And I would just shrug in response. I applied all sorts of creams on my legs. Sometimes it felt like it got a bit easier. And then again. And once more, night, moans. My wife goes to sleep in the kitchen to avoid hearing my suffering. One day, I struck up a conversation on a bench with David, who used to work as a paramedic. He's a calm guy and always offered sensible advice. He told me how he managed to get rid of it. Every evening, he says, he drinks an infusion with magnesium and herbs like chamomile and valerian. And he's over 75, full of energy, smiling. At first, I listened and brushed it off. Well, I think I'd tried just about everything. Then, one night, I couldn't sleep again and suddenly remembered his words. I got up in the morning, got dressed, and headed to the pharmacy. I bought magnesium and some herbs at the market. The first few days were uneventful, but by the third evening I fell asleep more peacefully. And then I suddenly realized there hadn't been a single cramp all night. It felt like my peace had been restored. I woke up feeling refreshed this morning, even did some exercises. A lot has changed since then. If you're also tormented by nighttime cramps, I suggest you listen to my story. Everything can change. You just have to want it. Before I begin, I'd like to get to know you. Please share your name and how old you are. Now, let me start my story. Nighttime cramps are not just the whims of moody muscles. As we age, many of us face this phenomenon. Doctors explain that after 60, muscles become less elastic, and nerve endings become overly sensitive to even the slightest disruptions. I often compare it to my old phone. If the wires inside get loose, the connection can drop at any moment, and suddenly your whole body lets you down without warning. Many people believe that nighttime cramps are just something to accept. It's simply part of getting old. But the truth is, these pains can quietly poison each day, robbing you of sleep and energy. This was the 9th step in my journey, but it was the starting point of my return to peaceful evenings and true relaxation. It all began last fall when the nights grew longer and colder. Back then, I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. It seemed like minor things, like a tingling sensation in my leg or a bit of fatigue, were just part of everyday life. But if I had known where that would lead, maybe things would have turned out differently. Isn't it strange? You go on living your life, and suddenly one small detail changes everything. I remember that first night. The pain hit me so suddenly that I jumped out of bed as if someone had doused me with ice-cold water. A cramp seized my leg, and I rubbed my calf, pacing around the room, trying to catch my breath. When the pain finally eased, sleep was nowhere to be found. I lay there, staring at the darkened ceiling, while my mind buzzed like a swarm of flies. One thought chased the other, leaving me no escape. Just when I would start to drift off, a spasm would hit again, this time in my other leg. And so it went night after night. I thought to myself, is this really my new normal? I blamed everything on my age, the change in weather, and the fatigue from house chores. I tried not to complain, convincing myself that it would just pass. But it only got worse. Every morning, I would wake up feeling shattered with a heavy head. My wife would come over, looking closely at me. "Did you not sleep again?" And I would stare at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing myself, with bags under my eyes and a gaze that seemed lifeless. It felt like I was no longer the person I used to be. Even the simplest tasks became a struggle. Sometimes I caught myself forgetting why I walked into a room, getting irritated over trivial matters, and by evening, a sense of sadness would wash over me. Even the TV stopped bringing me joy. Everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and my mood continued to plummet. It was painful, not so much because of the hurt, but because it was slowly taking away my life and the little joys I was used to. In those moments, I wondered, is this what getting old really feels like? Is there something I can do before it's too late? Day by day, the nights grew longer and heavier, and I felt more sluggish and helpless. This was the 8th step on my journey, and at that time, I had no idea that a turn awaited me ahead that would change everything. Sometimes I think that in the struggle against nighttime cramps, I've gone through all the rounds and each time ended up in a new maze of advice. It seems so simple. Drink water, don't wait until you're thirsty, and happiness will follow. I tried my best. I carried a bottle with me, forced myself to drink even when I didn't feel like it. But what was the result? My legs still cramped just as much, and now I found myself getting up to use the bathroom more often at night. Here you can't help but think, maybe these simple solutions were meant for someone else, but not for me. Then I started to remember what I used to do when I was younger and could easily do the splits on a dare. I began stretching my calves before bed, warming them up with a bottle, and massaging my legs like I was taught. Sometimes it felt like things were getting a bit easier, but just when I would celebrate, it would all come back a couple of days later. The irony of fate, the harder you try, the less you achieve, as if my body is deliberately testing my patience. Family and friends weren't any better with their advice. "Eat bananas, they have potassium," one suggested. Another insisted it was all about calcium, while a third said you can't go without magnesium. I even bought pills, creams, and tried vitamins, anything to help. But it all came down to one thing, a couple of nights of better sleep, and then it felt like I was back to square one. Honestly, I was starting to get angry. How long can you keep feeding yourself with hope? Online, the options are overwhelming. Some find relief through yoga, others swear by cold showers, and some go for a complete elimination of salt. I tried a little bit of everything, but at some point, I just felt drained, and my hands started to drop. I started to think, maybe I'll never be free from these struggles, given my age. My wife is worried, and all I do is sift through these pieces of advice like a collector of useless recipes. It gradually dawned on me. There really are no universal solutions, no matter how much we wish there were. Every body is a mystery, and what works for one person might only harm another. It's like trying to fix every issue in the house with just a hammer. Sometimes you really need a different tool. I was going through all these generic tips, but more and more I found myself thinking, what if I'm missing something important that isn't obvious? Well, I never expected that everything would start with such a simple, almost casual conversation. Just think about it. I was looking for answers everywhere, but not right in my own backyard. The solution turned out to be closer than I thought, suggested by a person with whom I had exchanged nothing more than brief greetings for years, never realizing that each of us was fighting our own hidden battles. David, my neighbor, a former paramedic, moved at a leisurely pace and had eyes that always sparkled with a quiet confidence. I had respected him for a long time, but I never imagined he would be the one to understand me without needing many words. It's one of life's mysteries. Sometimes the most valuable advice comes not from doctors on screen or from smart articles, but simply from a neighbor who notices you struggling to sit down on a bench. That autumn evening, I was unusually exhausted. David immediately asked what was wrong with me. Not sleeping again, he wondered. Was it those cramps bothering me? I was taken aback. I hadn't really complained, but it was as if he could see it without me saying a word. Then he suddenly shared his story, how he would wake up at night from pain, how tired he was of being constantly worn out, and how he had almost come to terms with it. And that's when I first felt it. I wasn't alone in this. It was like a quiet yet powerful affirmation that there were others like me, and there were those who had already traveled this path. David didn't lecture me. He simply shared a story about how his daughter, a doctor, once brought him magnesium powder from the pharmacy and insisted that he take it at night with warm herbal tea. If it weren't for her, he wouldn't have even tried it. He shared how he brewed chamomile with valerian, added magnesium to it, and sipped it slowly, taking his time. Just a week later, he noticed some changes. Listening to him, I caught myself wondering if it was truly a coincidence that we met at this particular moment. Is there something special about the advice from people you genuinely trust? I looked at him, so vibrant with clear eyes, and suddenly realized that sometimes these simple human conversations are more important than any medical diagnosis. That evening, he shared with me his family recipe, like an older brother offering guidance, kindly and without unnecessary words, but with the hope that it would help me too. It felt as if he was passing something important to me, like a relay baton, and I suddenly thought, maybe I can do this too. That was when I first truly considered trying out his advice. Sometimes, all it takes is one warm word from someone you trust to believe that change is possible, even when it has long seemed like there was no way out. To be honest, at that moment I had no desire to change anything. Every time someone suggests a new miracle remedy, I've already tried it all. I drank liters of water, stretched my legs, and rubbed in all kinds of ointments, all in vain. Sometimes I even caught myself thinking, maybe this is just my cross to bear, something that comes with age and there's nothing I can do to change it. It felt especially frustrating when I'd wake up at night with a cramp, staring into the darkness and feeling like a prisoner of my own habits. I think we all have those moments when we wonder, what if this is the last thing I'll ever be offered, and after this, there's nothing left? But one night, when a cramp seized me and I could hardly move, I remembered David's words. He talked about his evening routine with magnesium and herbs, and at the time I brushed it off, thinking it was just another one of those stories. But this person isn't the type to believe in empty promises. He has spent his whole life helping people, always calm and reliable. So I thought to myself, if he can do it, why can't I give it a shot? Ironically, sometimes it's easier not to believe than to give yourself a chance. What if it's not about age at all, but rather that I've become too accustomed to my own fatigue? The next morning, I walked to the pharmacy on autopilot to get some magnesium, and then I stopped by the market to buy chamomile and valerian. On my way home, I unexpectedly remembered my childhood, how my mom would brew herbal teas whenever we were sick. Maybe it really isn't that complicated. Perhaps change begins not with grand decisions, but with small acts of self-care. That evening, as usual, I reached for the remote, but then I stopped. Why not try something different? I put the kettle on, added some herbs, and mixed in magnesium powder. While the drink steeped, I settled into my chair, wrapped myself in a blanket, held a warm mug, and, for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to imagine. What if there's still something good ahead? It's not a miracle or magic, but rather a quiet transformation that you can feel within yourself. To be honest, I didn't expect it to really change anything. It all started almost casually. I decided not just to listen to the advice, but to actually incorporate this evening ritual into my life, making it a part of me, just like the habit of reading bedtime stories to my kids once did. Strangely enough, the process turned out to be surprisingly simple. I wasn't sure that such little things could lead to anything more than just distraction. But then I caught myself thinking, not everything important has to be complicated. Sometimes change comes when you stop expecting miracles. Every evening, about an hour before bed, I would treat myself to a cozy little ritual. It all started with an ordinary kettle boiling in the kitchen while I reached for my favorite mug with the worn-out design, the one my daughter gave me. I would toss in a pinch of chamomile and a bit of valerian, just like my friend Steve suggested, and waited for the water to cool down a bit so I wouldn't scorch the herbs. The very act of this unhurried routine seemed to transport me back to those years when everything was calm and clear. I would add a measured spoon of magnesium to the warm infusion, sometimes just a dash for flavor, and the scent would feel like a doorway back to my childhood, to that little town where my grandmother's place always smelled of hay and linden blossoms. I sipped my drink slowly, taking small gulps while sitting in a chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket. My wife was reading beside me, the street lights flickering outside, and the room was filled with silence. I tried not to get distracted by my phone or the news. I simply allowed myself to be present in the moment. This was my personal corner of tranquility, where no one disturbed me, and I suddenly realized perhaps it's these kinds of moments that serve as the mechanism for the body and soul to finally exhale. At first, it seemed like nothing special was happening, but I was determined not to give up and not to expect quick results. After all, old habits don't change overnight. I reminded myself, you've spent your whole life taking care of others. Now, it's time to take care of yourself. Strangely enough, after just a few days, I started to notice changes I hadn't expected. I fell asleep more peacefully, my leg muscles relaxed, and the cramps bothered me less frequently. I was waking up again feeling that nighttime was a time for rest, not a struggle. Now I realize it's not just about the magnesium and herbs. The ritual itself, this simple action, seems to oil those creaky internal doors I never even thought about before. Sometimes it was enough to give myself permission to embrace that little evening ritual of self-care, and life began to feel quieter and softer. Everyone has their own journey, but for me, this practice marked the beginning of significant changes. If someone had told me back then that such changes were possible in just a few days, I would have smiled in response. I had grown too accustomed to not expecting miracles from life. Yet, just a few evenings into my new routine, I suddenly found myself realizing one morning that I woke up not in pain, but simply because the sun had risen. It was so unexpected that at first I couldn't believe my feelings. Could it really be that simple? Could it be that after all these years of suffering, everything could change right now? I've always approached everything with a bit of skepticism. You won't believe it until you experience it for yourself. And then, on the third or fourth day, I, as usual, tuned in my legs to see if there were any twinges or pulls. And there was silence, such a pleasant, unfamiliar silence, as if someone had turned off that annoying nighttime alarm clock. The cramps hadn't completely disappeared, but they had become much less frequent and, more importantly, weaker. Sometimes I catch myself feeling anxious. Is it too soon to celebrate? Could it all just be coincidence? But with each passing day, I became more convinced. The changes were real. The strangest thing is, I never could have imagined that a simple herbal tea and a bit more self-care could have such an impact on my sleep. I started sleeping more soundly, and my dreams became calmer. In the morning, my mind felt clear and my body light, as if I had shed an unnecessary burden. The day began differently, without irritation, without that dull dissatisfaction with myself and the world. I noticed again how the birds sang outside the window, how the fresh air filled the kitchen, and even a simple cup of tea felt special. Sometimes I wonder, why didn't I take better care of myself before? Do we often become our own biggest obstacle? Gradually, my energy returned. I felt like taking a stroll in the yard, chatting with the neighbors, and even picking up a book. My mood evened out, and I stopped snapping at my loved ones over little things. My wife was the first to notice. "You seem to have gotten younger," she said. "Even your face looks brighter." And indeed, I found it easier to smile, joke, and just live, without the fear of my own body letting me down each night. I suddenly realized that even a small improvement is a significant victory. The key is not to give up on yourself, even when it feels like everything is already decided and nothing will change. When your body responds with gratitude to your care, it brings faith and the strength to keep moving forward. I think that was the turning point when I truly believed that change is possible at any age, if you just give yourself even a small chance. Honestly, I never imagined that a simple evening ritual could have such a profound impact on my life. At first, it seemed like it was all about getting a good night's sleep so I wouldn't wake up in pain. But over time, I suddenly realized that I was waking up not because something was bothering me, but because I was actually well rested, as if I had been waiting for this real rest for many years. In the morning, my mind feels clear, and my thoughts are not tangled, as if someone has wiped clean an old window and opened up a fresh perspective on familiar things. I've regained some energy that I had almost forgotten about. My stride has become lighter. I no longer catch myself listening closely for any signs of trouble. Now I can step outside calmly, without the fear of getting stuck in the middle of the path if something unexpected happens. The day feels different. More energy, less desire to lie down like I used to. Sometimes I catch myself wondering, is it really that simple? I've put up with this state for so many years, as if it was something permanent, but it turns out that change is closer than it seems. My mood has leveled out, the irritability is gone, and my wife even jokes, "You've really transformed." Maybe she's right. When you get enough sleep, your thoughts are clearer and your heart is calmer. Even my appetite has returned. Breakfast is enjoyable again, just like in my youth. The most surprising thing is that long-standing fear of stumbling or losing my balance has faded away. To be honest, I always thought that as I got older, things would only get worse. But it turns out that restorative sleep and relaxed muscles can bring a sense of confidence I never thought I'd experience. My heart beats more steadily, and even my stomach has stopped acting up. Sometimes I wonder, what if I never took the leap to try? How many more years would I have faced the morning with dread and gone to bed feeling anxious? Now everything feels different, as if someone plugged in a long-dead phone and suddenly everything is working. The ringtone is louder, the battery lasts longer, and the connection to the world feels stronger. It turns out that change doesn't require heroic acts. You just need to try and not miss your chance. This 8th step showed me that even a small effort can bring back the simple joy of waking up without fear, going to bed with the confidence that the night will pass peacefully, and being thankful to a new day for that tranquility. And that's the most important thing I've realized over these months. It turns out that even a small change in everyday life can turn everything upside down. I used to think, what else can I change at my age when my body suddenly starts to let me down? But one evening, when cramps kept me from sleeping again, I desperately wanted to try something new, even if it seemed too simple, almost naive. Suddenly, I felt calm slowly returning, not just in my legs, but also in my soul. Sometimes it feels like our problems are so ordinary that it's almost embarrassing to talk about them. But for some reason, having an honest conversation with ourselves without making excuses becomes that crucial first step. I wasn't sure if my ritual would work. I didn't have any confidence in it at all. But I thought, it can't get any worse, and maybe it will get better. The vision of a future where I could sleep peacefully again and greet the dawn without fear turned out to be stronger than the habit of just enduring. And now I find myself surprised. A simple belief in change and small acts of self-care can bring back what seemed long lost. I reach out to everyone reading these lines who may recognize themselves in my words. Don't be afraid to seek your answers. Don't think it's too late to make a change. Sometimes it's our humble attempts that turn into the most valuable experiences. Give yourself this chance at least once. After all, who knows what pleasant changes await us with the new evening ahead?